Welcome YouTubers. My name is Suresh Kumar and today's topic is about NUT server, network UPS tools. This is open source software and the URL is provided on your screen. So if you want to deep dive and look at it, please go ahead and have a look at it. Don't worry about show notes. You don't need to take any notes. All the show notes are provided in my website, absorbtv.com. So let's get into NUT server. The way I like to explain the NUT server is by showing you the web interface, a web UI. The NUT server provides you in case you installed it. Because once you know the output, you get a general understanding, hey, how powerful this particular server is, right? So let's look at the output. So here is the output. Now the IP address is where I installed the NUT server. I got a Raspberry Pi. I installed my NUT server in that particular hardware. So I got 4 UPS, right? It shows you all my UPS, and these are the names I've given. You can give any name you like. It keys off the model number straight away, gives you the status and also the percentage charge. Now, input and output voltage, in my experience, NUT server doesn't accurately report it, so don't get too bogged down with those information. It also gives you a load, and there are some URL links, data tree as well as here, right? So we'll come to that later. Now, as you can tell from the screen, these are very important information, right? I mean, the load is very important. Why? Because in case load is more, you can say, no, you can determine, hey, maybe I need a higher spec UPS. If your load is less, you probably can think, you know what, I can attach more stuff to the UPS, because load is less, right? So you can make all sorts of decisions based on the load, right? Now let's look at the various URLs. If I click one of these links, what do I get, right? So let's look at it. This is a pictorial diagram of the first information. Let's go back. Now what happens if I click here, all data, right? So let's look at it. So that particular link will provide you all the information of the UPS. I mean, these are very useful information. It gives you even the manufacturing date, battery date in which it was bought, or manufactured. So you get a lot of useful information from this particular screenshot or URL. So let me explain about the UPS, because this is something you must know before you start trying to install the NUT server. In my case, I got 4 UPS. There are 2 vendors, APC and CyberPower. Now, you have to be careful in how you select UPS. Number 1, you want to make sure you go with the major vendors like APC, CyberPower, because normally they work better. Number 2, you want to make sure they have a USB interface. This is very important. They must be having a USB interface. And also the hardware to which it is attached must have a USB interface. So we'll come to that later, why it is necessary, right? Number 3, in case, let's say, you are going to buy a brand new UPS, it's a good idea to go to the NUT server's URL. They have provided you with the compatibility list. So you could choose an UPS which is within the compatibility list. Having said that, most of my UPS are not in the compatibility list, but still works. I didn't go that route because I already had the UPS before I installed the NUT server. So, but I'm just telling you lessons learned, right? So you want to make sure these 3 criteria are important. Now, one of the things I told you is the hardware also has to have a USB. This needs little explanation. Let us say you got a UPS. Now let's take for example APC B600M1. We know this has got a USB interface. Now you need to connect this to some hardware, right? How will you connect it, right? So you need to that hardware, let us say it's a Synology. It has to have a USB, right? So when you connect it, then when the NUT server connects to this, it can key off the information of this hardware, which is also connected to the network, right? So that is why it's highly important the hardware to which you're attaching does have a USB. Now there are some exceptions, we'll come to that later. So each of my UPS is connected to one of the hardware which can read the UPS. So let's see that how that works. In case of my Synology, there is an UPS portion or tab on the software. I've enabled it. On the USB type drop down, I selected the USB UPS, and by doing that is able to key off the information of my UPS, right? So this is what I was talking about, right? You need to make sure your hardware has got a UPS, a USB, and it has got software necessary to read the UPS information attached to it via USB. Now this is my Open Media Vault Network Data Storage, OMV in short. This is also an open source software. It has got a UPS under services. I've enabled it and is able to key off the information. This is my netgate router. The same scenario. It is able to key off the information from the software. So let's look at my infrastructure right now. That way you get a better idea how to go about installing the net server. So here you can see blue boxes are the hardware, the green ones are the UPS, and each of the hardware is attached to my UPS, the only exception being the network switches. We'll come to that later. Now the UPS is connected to the hardware, so it's supplying power. Now we need to connect the router to the network switch via a network cable. We've done that. Now we need to connect the various hardware to the network switch. Done that. Now let's spend some time on this particular topology, right? Imagine I got some interface here, and that interface is connected to the network switch. And also let us assume for a moment this hardware or interface is also connected to the UPS via USB. Now you can tell by this assumption this piece of hardware which is connected to the network can basically key off the information from each one of this UPS, right? And can collate the information and report it to you. So this is what the NUT server does. So we need to install a hardware. In my case, I'm going to install this NUT server on my Raspberry Pi, and that Raspberry Pi will be connected to this UPS via USB, and also the Raspberry Pi will be connected to the network switch, and it can read off the information from all this UPS, and the NUT server software has to be configured in such a way this acts like a master and this as a slave and can report all the information to you. So this is how it works, right? As I told you in my second screen, the IP address 192.168.0.29 is where we saw the net UI, network interface, right? So this acts like a master connected via USB to the UPS, and also connected to networks via the network cable. So now, once I install the NUT server and configure it, it can easily communicate to all this USB. It's a one-way communication. Just these things report information to the Raspberry Pi. It collects it and reports it. So next, we'll discuss about how we go about installing the NUT server. Oh, here is how I'm going to break down my video. Number one, we'll discuss about the hardware used. We'll install the Ubuntu on the microSD card, which is attached to the hardware. Then install the NUT server. We'll configure the NUT server with a single UPS connected. We will then configure the web server and view the URL. We'll later configure other UPSs to the server and view the URL. Okay, so let's look at the hardware used. So these are three things which I bought from Amazon, and don't worry about taking notes. All the show notes will be down with the video. The first thing is I bought is a ARM based hardware. I couldn't get a Raspberry Pi, so I had no other choice but to buy this, So I paid around 35 bucks. I paid also 10 bucks for the power supply and 10 bucks for the micro SD card. As you can see, I removed the micro SD card. Let's try to put the micro SD card, insert the micro SD card inside the ARM based hardware, because you need to be very careful. So I'm showing you the ARM based hardware upside down. So this is how the orientation of the micro SD card should look like. Remember, it is not pressed yet. You have to insert it and then press it. So when you press it, it will sink a little bit inside. So it will go from here to here. Okay. So let's try to install Ubuntu on this piece of hardware. Okay. Okay, let's install Ubuntu. The first order of business is to download the Ubuntu image and flash the micro SD card. So let's do that right now, shall we? Okay. So this is where you go, and don't worry, everything is in the show notes. So you go to armbin.com, armbin.com, then go to download. We are looking for La Potato. So we browse, there it is. And we download the Ambien JB using direct download. Now I already done that. So let's flash the micro SD card. What I've done is I downloaded this image and also inserted my micro SD card to a USB stick. So let's use Balena Etcher to flash this micro SD card, shall we? Now don't worry, everything is in the show notes. You don't need to take any notes. Okay, all the links, etc. are all the show notes. So we're going to point the file to the one we just downloaded. Then I know my SD card is connected to a USB drive. Make sure this is extremely important. Don't point to the wrong USB drive, or you might basically remove your OS and stuff like that. But be very careful, okay? Make sure this is the USB drive is the correct one before you select it. So mine is correct. Mine is an E, and let's flash it. Okay. Now, since it's flashing the micro SD card, there are two very interesting things about this image. One is it is customized for this ARM, number one. Number two, SSH is automatically installed by default, so you don't need to worry about that. Number three, the default username is root, and the default password is 1234. Make sure you take note of it. Okay, it will be in the show notes anyway. So, and once you flash it, what we do is I'm going to take this micro SD card, rather the flashed micro SD card, insert it into the La Potato, connect the La Potato to my network, to my router using a network cable, connect the power supply to the La Potato, and basically boot the drive, boot the La Potato. I'll wait probably 5 minutes or so. Then I'll go to my router I'll go to my DHCP list. Each router is different, so your mileage may vary. So look at something like DHCP lease, and you can see La Potato listed as one of the hardware connected to the router, right? If it is not showing up, make sure the microSD card is inserted all the way in. Remember, I showed you need to orient it correctly and press it inside, right? Make sure it is oriented correctly and inserted correctly, right? So the router will show you the IP address of the card. What you do then is go to PuTTY, open PuTTY using that IP address you got from the router, port 22, and basically, SSH into the La Potato. So from there, we can install NUT server. So that's the procedure. We're almost done now. Done. Okay, the next step, as I told you, is I'm going to take the microSD card, connect to my La Potato, connect the La Potato to my router using network cable, power it up, wait for 5 minutes, then look at my router, get the IP address. Then the next step will be to SSH using the IP address with the root and 1234 as the password. Okay, see you then. Okay, let's try to install Ubuntu right now. What I've done is I've connected my layer potato to my router using network cable. I've also inserted the flashed micro SD card into the La Potato. I've also powered up the La Potato as well. So this is PuTTY. Using the router, I found my IP address as 192.168.0.90 and the port is 22. You can see in your router, it will be listed under DHCP lease. So if you look at your router, it will list La Potato and you can key off the IP address from there. So let's try to SSH into the La Potato. First time when you enter, you will get a warning like this. You just ignore it and accept it. Okay, the default user is root. Default password is 1234. 1234. Okay, I'm going to give a root password ABC123. I mean, don't give this password, okay? Make sure you give a strong password. I'm just doing this quick and dirty to show you guys. ABC123. Okay, I want bash. So I pressed 1. Please provide a username. Okay, I'll give my username. Password again SUR123. SUR123. Okay, my real name is Suresh Kumar. Set your user language based on your location. Yeah, why not? I'm in New York time zone, so yes. Locales, I want English US, that is 1, right? So I'll give 1, enter. Okay, let's clear the screen. So the first command, what we are going to do is we're going to update the Ubuntu as well as install the NUT client and NUT server. Don't worry about the command, they're all in the show notes, okay? Just look at it, understand it, and you can always copy everything from the show notes. So this is the first command. Let's run it. Do you want to continue? Yes, I want to continue. Press yes. And also I've connected my UPS to my La Potato. I forgot to tell you that. Using the USB cable, which was provided by the manufacturer no, of the UPS. You want to make sure you use a good UPS, USB cable. Sometimes if the USB cable is not good, it won't work. Okay, that's done. Let's clear it. Let's install all the USB utilities if there's any. No, it is. Okay, done. Now let us see whether it shows the UPS connected to La Potato. So command for that is, there it is. See, it does show my APC UPS connected, right? So we are golden. Okay. So next command is we are going to go to this particular directory. Okay. Let's clear. And if you look at, there are a lot of configuration files. So we're going to update each of the configuration files. Okay. So let's do that. The first one is UPS conf. So we go all the way down. By the way, I'm using Nano editor, which comes as a default editor. So let me enter my details here. Once I'm just trying to copy. Okay. So do the following entries. These are all the show notes. You don't need to worry and look at it and take notes. Okay. So basically, I chose to call my server as nut server. Okay. This is the nut server, right? And this is the default driver. This driver is recognized by most UPS. I never had a problem. And I gave a description. Now my UPS is B600M1. So let's Control O, enter, Control X. That will save. Let's make sure the entry is there. Yeah, we can see it, right? Okay, that's done. Let's clear the screen. Let's go to the next command. I'm going to keep on issuing the commands. Okay, you can copy it from the show notes. So go down. Obviously, you don't want to make any changes to the existing entries there. Okay. Okay. So this entry is basically saying, no, this is server name. Uh, this is the local host, and one is the kind of uh, it tells you whether uh, I forgot the name, but you need to enter one, okay? And the username I chose is a nut user, and the password I chose secret. And this is a master. You can either enter master or slave, but this is a master. So master, Control O, enter Control X. So let's do a cat on it. Make sure the entry is valid. Yeah, you can see it. Clear. Let's go to the next command. Next edit. So we have to create users. Nut user, right? We create a nut user. Okay, so we create a nut user with the password, which is secret. Nut user, we have chosen a password of secret. Of course, you want to give a strong password. Okay. Monitor, this is a master. I want to monitor as a master. This user is a master. Okay. They got credentials of a master. Control O, enter, Control X. Let's do a cat. Okay, we're done. Next, not configuration. Let's clear this. So let's go down. Okay, this one you want to change mode to net server. Control enter, Control X, cat. Okay, entry is there. Next, we want to see what happens is the NUT server creates a user called NUT. Okay, so let's see whether we can see that user. Okay, this is the command. Okay, okay, you can see here, see that there's a NUT user, right? So to get out of this command, colon small q. Okay, so we know there's a user called NUT. So what we need to do now is we need to change ownership of the NUT folder to NUT user. Okay, so we do that. Uh, okay, that's done. Then we need to make sure we give executable privileges to the NUT folder, right? So we change ch mode. Now let's start the UPS driver. Okay, it started. Now we need to make one change to this one. So let's go down. Remember, everything is in show notes. That's why I'm going quick. Okay. So we want to enter the listener port. Control O, enter, Control X, cat. Okay, scroll down. Okay. Now let's clear the screen. Let's start this. Oops, I got the wrong one. Hold on. Okay, let's start the NUT server. Okay, let's look at the status. Everything looks good. Success, no errors, startup successful, everything looks good. Okay, so let's look the service. What all services are there? Okay, if you see the NUT server right here, NUT server is plus, which means I think on startup it will start executing that particular process. Okay, now is the golden moment we're waiting for. We want to make sure if the NUT servers are installed properly, we should be able to look at all the parameters of the UPS using this command. Wonderful. As you can see, you get the serial number, the model number, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So the next step is we want to make sure that on startup, the job starts. Okay. It does listen, startup. Okay. Good. Everything looks golden. So at this point, we just reboot the server. Okay. That's all we have to do. Once we reboot, what we'll do is we'll try to install the what do you call that Apache client, Apache server, so that we can view the configuration using an URL. Okay, so let's reboot and let's go to the next step. So let's SSH into our lab potato. For this session, we are going to install Apache web server. Okay, so let's do that. I'll log in as root. Password is ABC123. Okay, we are in. So let me look at my cheat sheet. Okay, let's clear the screen. So first thing we need to install this Apache. So let's issue this command. All these commands are in show notes, so don't worry about taking notes. So let's do that. Okay, after this operation, additional disk space will be used. That's fine. Okay. I got a very fast internet, so your mileage may vary, you know. It may be a little slower if you have a slow internet. It's almost done. Okay. Now we need to edit the host file because Apache would have, yeah, there's no entry in it. Okay. So we need to make an entry here. Remember, our server was called nut server, right? So we need to make a host entry here. Okay. Let's make sure it is there. Let's do a cat. Okay, I do see it here. Okay, let's clear the screen. Now let's enable CGI. CGI is a common gateway interface. Okay. Okay, it says you have to start it. Yeah, of course I want to start it. Okay, it started. Another one thing we need to do is we need to uncomment a particular entry in this file. See this? We need to uncomment it. Let's make sure it's uncommented. Yeah. Now, now is the moment of truth. Okay. So we need to go to, if I remember right, 192.90. This is my existing server at home. So the new one was this one, right? Yeah. Okay. So this is the URL which you need to enter. And once you enter this URL, now you can basically look at the web interface. So if you click on this, it'll give you a pictorial diagram. As you can see, the battery is 100% charged. Don't worry about these voltages. These may not be very accurate. Let's go back. Now there's something called all data. So let's enter that. So here it lists all the parameters of the UPS. Battery date, battery manufacture date, runtime, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So at this point, we have come to a conclusion of basically configuring the web server. The next step would be how do you add the other UPSs, which are basically slave. Remember the first video which I showed you, how my home is networked with 4 UPS. So here right now we are looking at the UPS connected directly to La Potato. So how do you configure the parameters to make sure this server can read the other UPS details, right? So let's look at it right now. So how do we configure the other UPSs which are not directly connected to the La Potato? Remember when I showed you the first topology, I had 4 UPS, right? So this particular UPS we directly connected to the La Potato. Now these things are connected to a network, but the server was not aware of it, right? So how do you make that happen? It's extremely simple, okay? So what you do is, see this? Go to this file, right? And make sure you SSH into the server, and there's an entry, already entry, this entry is there, right? All you have to do is add the other entries, right? Now here I have now masked the username and password, okay? You need to enter the appropriate username and password, okay? uh, Now this is the server name, and it is an IP address, this one. 0 is a slave, okay? This one is a master, this is a slave. Username and password, and you have to mark it as a slave, not a master, okay? So you make similar entries to other two server UPS as well, right? You got the picture? Now you need to also edit the host file as well. I need to tell the host file similar information, right? You need to tell the host file, hey, what are the other UPS and what are the IP address and what is the name you want to give them. That's it. I mean, once you're done, now you can get a screen like this. Don't worry about Synology because the more security measures I need to take before it can show it, but you get the idea. So if I go here, I can look at it. I can look at all the data, netgate, stuff like that. So this concludes our video, my video on NUT server. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you have any comments, kindly, let me know below, or any questions you have. I try my best to answer it. So goodbye, and hopefully you'll have a successful NUT server implementation. Bye bye then.